You ever just sit there, not exactly sad, not exactly okay, just kind of silent, not in a peaceful way, more like your thoughts have been turned down to a low volume, and you're not even sure when you stopped listening, not to other people, but to yourself. See, most people who feel lost aren't actually lost. They still wake up. They still get through the day. They still reply to texts and go to work and scroll through the same apps like they always do. But underneath all that, they've stopped checking in. They've stopped asking real questions. They've stopped hearing their own voice because that voice started saying things that were too uncomfortable to face. So they mute it. They distract themselves. They move on autopilot and call it progress. But let's be honest, you know when you're drifting. You can feel it. You can feel that weird sense of distance between who you are and who you're pretending to be right now. It doesn't always hurt. Sometimes it just feels numb, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Because numbness doesn't scream like pain. It just lingers until one day you look around and the life you're living doesn't even feel like it's yours anymore. The weird part is, you can go months like this, looking functional on the outside, answering calls, smiling at people, posting when you feel obligated to. But the disconnection builds, slowly, and maybe that's the most dangerous thing about it. It's not dramatic. It doesn't crash. It just drifts. And because it doesn't hurt in a loud way, you don't notice how far you've wandered from yourself until you hit a moment, like late at night or right when you wake up, where you suddenly feel like a stranger in your own skin. You know what I mean? Like, you're not doing anything wrong technically, but everything feels off. And the crazy part is, you can't even explain it to people, because when you try, it just sounds like burnout or I need a break. But it's not just that. It's that you've stopped checking in with yourself so long ago that now you don't even know what your honest answer would be if someone asked you, what do you really want? Because the truth is, you haven't given yourself permission to ask that in a while. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because maybe you're afraid of the answer. Because what if the truth is that the job isn't right, that the relationship feels thin, that the dream you're chasing stopped being yours years ago? What if you've known all of that, quietly, but ignored it because changing would be too messy? So instead of facing that discomfort, you stay on autopilot. You get good at being numb. You call it being mature, or realistic, or just going through a phase. But deep down, a part of you knows you're not lost. You're just avoiding yourself, and you've gotten really good at it. You've built routines that let you escape the mirror. You've built conversations that never go deep enough to touch the truth. You've built a whole identity around not looking too closely. But sooner or later, life has a way of slowing you down. A song hits differently. A conversation sticks with you longer than it should. You hear something, or maybe you watch something, and it gets under your skin. And suddenly, for a second, that voice comes back. The real one. The one you used to listen to. And it doesn't yell. It just says, hey, remember me? Here's the part no one really tells you. The longer you ignore yourself, the better you get at pretending that nothing's missing. You become so good at managing life that it almost looks impressive. You're reliable. You're stable. You don't cause trouble. And from the outside, that looks like success. But inside, you're slowly starving parts of yourself you haven't spoken to in years. You start lowering the volume on your own thoughts just to keep up with the noise around you. You stop asking how you feel, because the answer keeps pointing you toward change you're not ready to make. And the scariest part, you start confusing numbness with peace. Like, if I'm not in pain, then I must be okay, right? But deep down, you know that's not true. You're not peaceful, you're just quiet. And there's a difference. Peace feels soft, numbness feels heavy. And the more you ignore that weight, the more your life starts feeling like something you're surviving, not something you're living. You ever notice that? You wake up and your first thought is what you have to get through, not what you're excited to build or feel or even experience. And that's what ignoring yourself really costs you. The ability to actually feel alive, not just functioning, not just holding it together, but actually being present in your own body, actually feeling connected to what you do, actually caring again, not because you're supposed to, but because something real is happening inside of you again. But that kind of connection, yeah, it takes honesty. And honesty is uncomfortable, especially when you've been avoiding it for a while. Because the moment you stop pretending, everything you've been pushing down starts rising back up. Old dreams, unspoken truths, quiet disappointments, they all come knocking. And it's tempting to slam the door again, to drown it out with another distraction, to say, not today, I'm busy. But maybe this is the moment you don't ignore it again. Not because you have to change everything right now, but because you're tired of feeling like a ghost inside your own life. And if that's where you're at, then listening to yourself again, even just a little, might be the bravest thing you do this year. The hardest part about reconnecting with yourself isn't hearing the truth, it's believing you still deserve to. Because when you've ignored something for long enough, you start to think you've lost the right to fix it. You tell yourself, I'm too far gone. It's been like this for too long. Maybe this is just who I am now. And that belief, that quiet resignation, that's what really keeps you stuck. Not failure, not fear, just the quiet decision to stop trying to come home to yourself. But no matter how long you've been gone, you haven't missed your chance. Because your life doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to show up, even now, especially now. And no, that doesn't mean you need to burn everything down and start over. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow, or end your relationship today, or suddenly become a new person by next week. You just need to stop pretending you're okay with a life that feels this numb. That's where real movement begins. Not with dramatic change, but with honest presence. You sit down, and instead of picking up your phone, you ask yourself a real question, one you've been avoiding. You give yourself permission to tell the truth, even if you're not sure what you'll do with it yet. You let yourself feel something uncomfortable, without rushing to distract it away. And the more you do that, slowly, gently, quietly, the closer you get to coming back to yourself. You start remembering things, what used to matter to you, what used to light you up, what you used to hope for, before everything got so muted. And maybe you won't fix everything today. Maybe you won't even know where to begin. But that's okay, because this isn't about fixing everything. It's about finally deciding to stop running from the one voice that's been trying to guide you all along. Yours. And if you're wondering what reconnecting with yourself even looks like, well, it's not some dramatic, glowing moment of clarity. It's quieter than that. It's realizing you're no longer avoiding certain thoughts. It's noticing that the silence you used to fear now feels like something sacred again. It's how you stop needing to fill every empty moment with noise. Because for the first time in a while, being alone with your own mind doesn't feel like punishment. Reconnection doesn't mean everything suddenly makes sense. It just means you finally stopped running long enough to ask yourself real questions. And you didn't flinch at the answers. It shows up in the little ways. You pause before saying yes to something you don't actually want. You notice when your energy dips, and you don't shame yourself for it. You stop apologizing for needing space, or rest, or quiet. And it's weird at first. It feels selfish. It feels unfamiliar. Because when you've built your entire identity around being fine, choosing honesty feels like breaking character. But the more you do it, the more honest you get. The more you realize that you were never broken. You were just buried under routines that didn't reflect your truth, under expectations you never agreed to, under a version of yourself that looked good on the outside, but never really felt like home. And that's the thing about ignoring yourself. You don't even know how far it's gone until you hear your real voice again. And it sounds unfamiliar, not because it's changed, but because you forgot what it sounded like. You forgot what it feels like to want something without filtering it through what's practical. You forgot what it's like to sit with your thoughts without distracting them away. You forgot that your inner world used to feel alive, not just managed, but memory is powerful, and even if you've been away from yourself for years, you can remember, you can rebuild, not by becoming someone new, but by finally becoming real again. That's the actual shift, not a transformation into something better, but a soft return to the parts of you that were never broken, just ignored. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, you'll start feeling it again, not all at once, not like a flood, more like a whisper, showing up in the background of your quietest moments. You'll catch yourself smiling at something stupid, something you wouldn't have even noticed before. You'll wake up and, just for a second, you won't feel that heavy sigh pressing down on your chest. And yeah, maybe the doubt will still be there. Maybe the uncertainty won't leave overnight, but it won't own you anymore. Because every time you pause and check in, every time you choose to listen, even for a few seconds, you're building something real inside you again. You're repairing the bridges you thought you burned. You're rebuilding trust with yourself. Tiny invisible threads weaving back together. Not because you forced it, not because you earned it, just because you finally decided you were worth hearing. You'll notice you're not filling every moment with noise anymore. The silence that used to terrify you, it'll start feeling like home. You'll sit with yourself, not to judge, not to fix, but just to be present. And it will feel strange at first. Maybe even a little uncomfortable, because you're not used to being with someone who's been ignored for so long. You're not used to treating yourself like someone worth knowing. But the more you sit with yourself without rushing to fix anything, the more you just let yourself exist, imperfect and unfinished, the more that voice inside you starts getting louder again. The one that knows what you want, the one that knows when you're lying to yourself, the one that isn't asking you to be impressive or successful or admired, the one that's just asking you to come home, not to some perfect, polished version of yourself, not to the person you show to the world, but to you, the one who's been waiting quietly underneath all the noise and the survival and the pretending. And that moment, when you finally choose to stop silencing yourself, it won't feel like a big breakthrough. It'll feel like breathing. The real kind, the deep, uncluttered, undeniable kind. The kind you forgot you were allowed to have. And if you're still here, still with me, then I'm going to assume something inside of you hasn't gone completely silent. Maybe it's faint, maybe it's tired, but it's still alive. And maybe, more than anything else right now, it just wants to be acknowledged, because you don't just wake up one day and feel whole again. It doesn't work like that. You don't flip a switch and suddenly feel aligned, confident, and clear. You drip back into yourself, moment by moment, in the slow, quiet ways that don't make noise, don't get noticed, and don't get shared. Reconnection is not a performance. It's not beautiful or organized or presentable most of the time. It's messy, it's personal, and it's deeply inconvenient for the version of you that's been trying to hold everything together. Because when you start listening to yourself again, you have to face all the things that went unanswered for too long. And yeah, that's hard. It's hard to admit how long you've been hiding. It's hard to grieve the months, sometimes years, you spent muted. It's hard to realize how many times you said, "I'm fine," when you really meant, "I'm empty." But if you can sit with that, if you can stay present in that honesty for even a little while, what you start to realize is that silence isn't the enemy. Avoidance is, because silence is where the truth actually lives. Not the loud, dramatic kind of truth, but the gentle kind that says, you're allowed to want more. You're allowed to feel disconnected and not have a perfect reason. You're allowed to be tired of pretending you're okay, just so other people feel comfortable. And it's in that space, when you finally stop editing yourself for the outside world, that you begin to feel real again, not fixed, not finished, but real. You start to notice what makes you feel present. You begin remembering the difference between peace and numbness. You give yourself permission to move slowly, without rushing to explain where you're going. Because reconnection isn't about rebuilding your old self. It's about stepping into the parts of you that survived the disconnect. The parts that kept whispering even when you weren't listening. And those parts, they're still here, still waiting, still willing to walk with you if you let them. You don't need to change your life today. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't even need to know what comes next. You just need to be with yourself, long enough to remember that you were never actually gone, just buried under a life that didn't make space for you to exist honestly. And yeah, it might feel awkward to start, to sit with your thoughts, to admit what you've been ignoring, to feel things that don't come with clear answers or quick fixes. But this is the return. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens when you pause, when you stop performing, when you choose to sit beside your own pain instead of trying to talk over it. And when you do that, when you stay in that quiet moment long enough to really hear it, that's when you finally start to come back to your body, to your truth, to your own rhythm, to the version of you that doesn't owe anyone an explanation. And if something in you felt any of that, even for a few seconds, then I want you to leave a single word in the comments. Return. Not for me, not for a number or the algorithm, just for you, to name what this is. Not a change, not a fix, but a return. A return to your own voice. A return to the parts of you stopped listening to. A return to your life. On your own terms, in your own timing, without apology. And if no one's told you this lately, you're allowed to come back. You're allowed to feel again. You're allowed to rebuild something soft, real, and slow. You're allowed to take your time, and you're allowed to start over, even if it's the 10th time this year. Because it's not about how long you've been gone. It's about the moment you decide you're done being a stranger to yourself. So take that moment, sit with it, and like always, enjoy your day, my friend. You don't need to chase yourself anymore. Just return.